Okay, I guess the organizer has indicated we can get started. So for this session, I thought since there's almost as many panelists as audience down below, my name is Max. I'm from Qilu Pharmaceutical Companies. Hopefully we can share some of our areas of interest, also past experience with you in terms of dealing with Asian companies. I guess we'll have first a quick intro on the panelists. Then I hope to save some time for people in the audience to ask some questions if you have any. To me, I think that's probably more interactive than just four of us talking on the panel. So I already did my intro. I'm the BD head at Qilu Pharma. I'm here to look for in-licensing and out-licensing opportunities of projects, pharmaceuticals. David?
David Xu, working at Viva Biotech, and if you go on the website, you will find Viva Biotech is a CRO company. But we started our investment business about 3 years ago. Currently, we have about 35 companies in the portfolio, and it's growing quickly. And we invest in a very early round, from seed round and Series A round investment. Our typical investment is about $2 million, ranging from somewhere between 1 million, 5 million, that range. And we based in Shanghai, and we have about office in Boston, 4 people there, and 1 person in San Diego. Most of our portfolio companies are in the U.S. and with some in China as well. I work in the U.S. for a long time. Most of this time with Novartis Pharmaceuticals, and in the R&D area and the commercial space as well.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Qingping Zhang. I'm the founder and CEO of Fosun Orano Pharmatech, which is based on Suzhou, China. We also have a U.S. subsidiary called Orano in Newbury Park or Southern Oak, California. So this company was founded, 3 of our partners are all from former company called Mankind Corporation. If you guys ever know Albert Mann, who is a rich person who donated a lot of money to a lot of universities, Mankind is the main product is inhaled insulin, only product in inhaled insulin. There's one time who partnered with Sanofi, then they divorced. So right now, so the project we were working on, actually 3 of us, our partners, worked for this project for many years. Then we eventually formed a partner with a big Chinese farmer called Fosun Pharma. Actually, me and the lady who's absent are both subsidiary of Fosun Pharma, which has global aspirations to develop pharmaceutical products, not only in China, but also went out to globally. We do have actually a European subsidiaries too here. Our main product is first-in-class, innovative, small molecule oncology product. So you can tell, although we are a small company, but we have a global footprint. So I'm happy to be here to discuss how the financial arrangement was made. And my purpose to come here and also BioEuro is to find a strategic partner who can co-develop our first-in-class molecules in US. Right now it's in US in clinical trial.
Hi, my name is David Malik. I'm an operating partner at a venture fund called Pivotal Bioventures China. Pivotal Bioventures China has a single LP, which is a group called Fund Life Sciences. It's a group based out of Hong Kong with about $1.5 billion under management, all in life sciences, primarily therapeutics. And our fund, which is a $200 million fund, is the China component of that group. Myself, I'm actually based in Israel, but most of the fund is based in Shanghai, and we have a partner also in San Francisco. We deal primarily, almost exclusively with therapeutics, biotech pharma. We're a bit unique in the sense that most of our investments are to companies that we incubate and build on our own. In therapeutics, we tend to do that based on a therapeutic area. We also work not just in China. So, for example, the first company we've set up, which is in the oncology field, is actually headquartered in Waltham, Massachusetts, with a subsidiary in Shanghai. But we can do it in various ways. All of our investments would have some relation to do with China, even though we can invest, our fund is a US dollar fund, so we can invest anywhere in the world, if that makes sense. That's pretty much it.
Great, thanks everyone. So I guess with the remaining 40 minutes or so, some of the topics we listed here, I thought it'd be helpful for the panelists to share some of the experiences or lessons learned working with Asian companies. I think probably be helpful for the people in the audience. So I'll start by sharing maybe something I learned in through my BD process. So but before I joined Qilu, I was the BD head for Eli Lilly in Asia for the diabetes franchise. So I guess I'm fortunate to have sit on both sides, both the large pharma US side, and now I'm representing a Chinese company. So some of the lessons learned is that so we did. When I was at Lilly, we licensed a phase 1 diabetes product to a Chinese company called Tesla. So there's quite a bit of I guess discussions when it comes to the due diligence process. The Chinese company, I think a lot of the scientific aspect of the projects, it requires a lot of hand holding to walk them through. I think so. One piece of advice for people that working with traditional Chinese pharmaceutical companies is that some aspect on the scientific side of things, you might have to spend a bit more time, especially if you can do a personal visit. I think that probably common to all Asian companies that the in-person visit much better than, say, a TC or a video conference. And part of the reason could be due to communications. Part of it could be just cultural difference. When you make a personal visit, they view you as more serious about the relationship. So that'd be, I guess, one piece of advice I would give when you're working with Asian companies. David?
Probably I've been in China for just over a year. My impression, part of the Viva Biotech, we have 30-something companies, and some of those companies already have their assets now in the clinical stage. In the last few months, a couple of months actually, I've been trying to engage the local big farmers in China just to see if they will be interested to partner with some of our portfolio company to further develop this product. So a couple of things I've learned. First, a lot of companies claim they have a lot of money. In reality, they are very stingy to come up with the money. And I don't know if they do have money or they don't. I don't know. So it just seems like oftentimes when they wanted to look at everything, but when it comes to money, and it will be it's a very hard conversation. And the second thing is most of the Chinese companies today, maybe Qilu is an exception, and Fusang is another one. It's the degree of global presence is very weak, and most of the time they only need China rights. They don't, even though you have a product, they cannot handle the global rights. So that is the second thing I've learned. And another thing is, in talking to the Chinese company, they often they don't do a lot of due diligence. They would rather have like a performance-based contract rather than spend like a month to do the due diligence like a typical Western companies would do. Because I don't know, either they don't have the capability of doing that, or is it because they don't, they have just intrinsically don't trust the data. So that's my kind of quick takeaway in the last few months dealing with big farmers in China. And I still need to learn a lot more.
So maybe let me just touch on a couple of things that David brought up. When it comes to money spending, I want to say, at least speaking for Qilu, right?
Yeah.
We have money, but we are very careful at spending the money. Because the owner of the company feel that it's a hard-earned money. So some of the deals we're talking as we speak. Actually, one of the partners I met earlier this morning, we're talking about $20 to $25 million upfront payments. So if the project is right, then we're willing to spend the money. But where to spend the money, how much we spend, it's a very carefully calculated process. Just because you have money doesn't mean you're just going to spend on everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's more to do with the strategic fit on the project with the company.
Yeah, actually, both of you touched upon culture difference. I want to mention too. So for the Western companies, I worked in U.S. for 27 years in 3 big farmers, Pfizer, MT, and Mankind. So most of the U.S. is contract bonded. Once they trust you, they usually give you a relatively freedom to operate. So for a certain level, they give you the investment and you can in that. But in China, like what David just said, they said that they have a lot of money. But the way they are gaining their trust is by a personal connection. So that's why it is very important to have build the personal trust before you can reach to any really can ink on a piece of paper deal. Even the deal is done, it's still check and balance is always there. So I never see a Chinese-based company give you a lump sum of money and go for it. So usually they promise a lump sum of money, and you have to increasingly showing incremental progress to get the money, committed even money, to be able to allow you to spend. So that's a major, I think, a culture difference. Build the personal trust first, then go to check and balance with the progress, like you said. So that's exactly, because a lot of my American friends feel frustrated because they said, oh, you guys promised gonna give us that money and we're gonna spend it. Why is I'm not seeing the money in my bank? So that's not how the Chinese company operates. So you have to have that culture in mind.
Maybe I'll just maybe continue on this point and maybe talk about some other stuff, but I agree in general it's a lot less of a litigious type of culture, and legal documents don't have the type of meaning that they maybe have, especially in the US, but also in Europe. But it could go both ways, I have to say. For example, I mean, people are obviously concerned about where it goes against you, but I'll give you an example. I had a situation where I worked with another fund, and we tried to build a company together. We didn't have an agreement in place, and we sort of had a gentleman's agreement that we would share legal costs in the process. And they had an issue getting their fund set up in terms of getting their money into the fund, etc., and got delayed, and I got pressured to get that 50% back. And I talked to my partner there and I said, listen, I'm under a lot of pressure to get this, your 50%. And he literally took out a personal check, wrote a $30,000 personal check and said, I'm going to figure it out with my fund. You should be whole on that. No agreement. Just get your fund paid what you're owed, and I'll figure it out with my fund. Which is something you're not going to see, I think. I've at least haven't seen that in other places. So it goes both ways. When people are with you, they're with you whether you have a piece of paper or you don't. So it's just something to acknowledge. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm not Chinese originally. So I've, I think this is still a process for me as well. I think my biggest observation about China is that across the board, not just in pharmaceutical, it's a country of variance. So if you go to countries like Austria or Switzerland, you get just one type of product, typically very, very good, very, very expensive. That's what you get. You want to buy an antibody, you want to buy whatever it is, this is kind of what you get. In China, there's a much more complex matrix. You get extremely high quality things which might or might not cost a lot of money. You get extremely low quality things which might or might not cost a lot of money. There's a big variance there, which I think is causing a lot of people who are not from China to be concerned about that, because you're sort of in for a surprise sometimes. But it also is the reason why you have a chance for an opportunity, because you do still have things there that are not rightly priced or valued. You still have high quality teams, technologies, opportunities that might not come at the same price tag that you would see them in other places in the world, and that's really what's creating the opportunity. To me, the key is to find someone or a team that you trust and you could work with, and stick with them and do your stuff through them and with them, and then you can get access to a lot of really great things. Otherwise it's very hard. You can't just meet people like maybe I was used to more when I worked mainly in the US and Europe. Just meet folks, have a 1 hour conversation, we'll walk through a deal. You have to build this thing. But once you have this type of personal infrastructure, they'll work with you for decades, and you'll get great opportunities if they're right people. Both parties are really going to benefit. So it's a very different type of dynamic, and finding that right point of contact is sometimes hard, but in my personal experience at least, it's been worthwhile. So that would be my 10 cents to this discussion.
Thanks. Definitely test your patience, I think, the process. So maybe next topic, I think we still have time. The investment process, we'll start at the end with David.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's tremendously different than, in our fund at least, than US funds. Again, it's back to the point of variance. So if you look at who invests in China, there's a very big spectrum of investors. Even in smaller biotechs, it could be anywhere from, fairly, let's call it westernized funds of folks that, like OrbiMed China, or I saw James from KPCB was here before, and folks that basically just follow a very similar process. It could go into local funds, it could go into government-funded funds, and you can go to some of these like enormous private equity funds that have, just raised an $11 billion single fund. They have different processes. In general, they're sort of the same. The PE funds, I think some of the challenge with them when in biotech is that they're looking at it as PE, so they're looking at getting a lot of certainty in a place that doesn't have certainty, so they want models and how much you're going to sell of this and then what's going to be your budget in 2027, and that's sometimes hard process to just tell them, I don't know, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But typically funds in China have 2 to 3 IC meetings, which is what you kind of have to go through. The first IC is more a general, this could be interesting, please explore further, you can invest more resources internally into looking into this. The second IC tends to be the most important one, which is, yes, we think this is the right investment story, it's the right valuation, it's the right management, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it ends there. Some funds have a third IC, which is come back to us with everything wrapped up, all of your financing documents, all of the due diligence document, everything wrapped in a bow, and it should be more of a procedural IC meeting than anything else, unless something really significant has happened. So not tremendously different than, I guess, US funds at least.
So maybe Qingping can share the Foshan story, right? We'd like to learn as well.
What I can share is that in China, there are a lot of opportunities. It is true, there's a lot of people has a lot of monies, but they are also very, cautious with their money. So in terms of investment, my past experience is that when you have a big partner, either a fund or company who is established or famous, it's very easy, just because the namesake of that company, there's a lot of smaller funds or unfamous funds waiting to match. So in my case, when we first talked with Fosun Pharma, it's basically like this David said, they started trusting our team first. They didn't really do a very in-depth due diligence in terms of all our data. Then they decided to invest, and also they have checkpoints on the milestone in terms of the money committed to spend. But because of Fosun is a famous company in China, there's a lot of funds which is less famous in the US or in China, either waiting to pitch in. Unfortunately, Fosun just saying, no, we don't want other people to deal with. We just want to have a smaller, a less number of shareholders. But a similar situation when you have a late stage product or in the late stage clinical trial for pharmaceutical companies, when you have a famous investment fund like JP Morgan or some big banks, and usually a lot of Chinese funds will match or even put in more. So if you are controlling a big fund, you don't have to necessarily put 100%, maybe 10% of it. The rest of 90% are going to automatically come.
But I have to say, this is true also.
In US, true.
If you have big funds that come in, the small ones.
Because most of the funds, they don't have sophisticated methodology to evaluate an asset. So rely on other people. That's.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And probably US and China similarly, when you have a famous fund and the rest wanted to follow. But I think in China probably more pronounced in the US. For us it's a little bit different. We are kind of a very early stage investment. Our investment size typically very small, and we are very nimble and fast. And we cannot, do our due diligence very shallow, to put it this way. But we do have a panel of experts telling us if the idea is good or bad, because there's no data in the idea stage. So and also our decision-making process is also relatively simpler than the big VCs, and we normally we still have 2 rounds of ICs. One IC is in the term sheet stage, whether or not this is what's going to the term sheet negotiation, and what is roughly what is our term sheet structure going to be like. And the second IC is the final decision. Here's all we have to negotiate. Are we willing to invest? Typically, we only take about 2 to 3 months on average to make an investment decision. Of course, the rejection is a lot faster. We last year, 2018, we looked at several hundreds. We're talking about maybe 500, 600, something that range of proposals. We funded 20 something of them. So it's. I would say the quality we have is pretty good. We have about 20 people on our expert panel to help us to pre-screen. That's why we can reach such a volume of proposals. Yeah.
I do want to say one thing. If you're going to pitch for investors in China, let's say US, Europe, a good sanity check is if you don't have two fairly different decks, you're doing something wrong. You should, as a rule of thumb, I would say that your deck should look 30% different in China. What I mean by that is that there are just different, I'm talking on average now, there are different criteria. Typically, for most of the investors in China, the discussion is going to be less heavy-duty science. Please explain to me exactly what this enzyme does at every given moment, how much it binds to whatever, at which point, etc. There is a science portion, but it's less pronounced, whereas if you go to a lot of early-stage US funds, for example, you'll spend 80-90% of your time on that, nobody cares about the financials almost. And you would need to still, even if it's early stage, the way I call it is you have to tell them why this is a business also, potentially. Across 95% of the funds that I know in China. So even if you're early stage, preclinical, innovative, you should talk about your science for sure, but you should definitely explain why this has a market, why this has, advantage over competition, or someone will pay for this. All of these questions, even if it's relatively high level, you have to explain why this could become someday by someone a business. And if you don't have a different set of those, if the balances are the same between your US deck or your European deck and your China deck, then one of those decks is off, for sure, or both. That's one thing I would say, is to spend time to talk about the market, talk about the disease, talk about where this is going, and then talk about the science, what your technology does, and all that fun stuff. That would be one key difference that I'm working a lot with CEOs to understand.
Yeah, it's particularly true when many of the the money owners they own a big farm. It's like they not necessarily scientific trained scientists, so they need to know the market. They need to know if you have any ideas how this going to be monetized later on. And of course for us it's more like helping them to understand, but if you already think along this line, it's going to be definitely beneficial.
Okay, so maybe I'll share what Qilu's investment process looks like. So we typically do two types of investment. One is project-based. So these will be heavily checked on the scientific aspect of things. A good example would be, so we have an incubator in Boston that we're attracting startup companies based on a concept or an idea. Then our internal teams, mostly considerably returnees from the US, will do probably a few months of checking on the scientific rationale behind this company. If everything checks out, then we typically invest money into the company and provide the space because we bought a building in Boston. So we a third cheap rent for the company plus investment into the company. Second type of investment we do is for people, similar to what Zhengping said. So example of that would be, so we have a R&D center in Seattle. When I think the Amgen closed down the Seattle site, there's a group of 20 also scientists that they don't want to come back to China, but we like their scientific background. So what we did is, so we kept them together. There's around 20 people. Then we form a company basically we give them money and they do research, and whatever antibody they discover, she has the China rights. So it's sort of similar to what Qingping's case. Now we did the same for San Francisco. I think when Pfizer closed down, I forgot the name of the company. We did the same thing recently in Shanghai. A group of scientists from Pfizer retired. They want to come back to work in China. They have no IP, they have no projects, and just we look at the people's background. They have more than 25 years of experience in Pfizer, and we said, okay, these guys, they know drug discovery. Let's invest in the people. So we, rent some buildings in Shanghai, pay these guys U.S. salaries. Now they're up and going. They're their own company. So these are the two type of investment we currently doing. The team aspect, like the panelists said, very little scientific diligence because you're investing in the people. But in terms of projects, we do check on the science quite carefully. Now we're in the process of setting up a third avenue of investment. So like many Chinese pharma companies and US pharma companies, they have a VC arm. So when I was working for Eli Lilly and Merck, they all have a VC fund that purely invest just money. So Qilu is thinking about setting up a VC fund, probably towards later this year. We'll have our own venture fund that we can, if you have a company, just raise Series A or angel round, we can be just a pure investor for that option. So I think people are quite flexible in China. They are careful when they investing their money, but I don't think anything wrong with that. And if it's your money, you want to be careful with it too, right? So I think we have another 10 minutes left.
Do you want to see if the audience has anything?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So one question about the particular model that was mentioned for funding on China rights, basically. So you get China rights. Did you have any experience so far with what happens during the exit or option negotiation with other pharma in Europe and the USA? Is this a deterrent for them that you have the China rights, or are they just don't care?
Yeah, so I'd say that's a great question. So when I was at Lilly, right, I did BD, when we talking to people, a lot of the smaller companies, they worried. They said, well, if I give away China rights, what if Lilly want to buy the asset, right? I have to say, if the product is good, you don't have China right, they don't really care.
The indication is big enough.
Yeah, exactly. If the product is maybe not, you have China right, they still don't care, right?
It's true.
So I think if you have confidence in your product, it's a big market enough, and it's going to be a drug. Without China, I don't think it make a difference these days.
The only place that would have so people think about it from the financial perspective, and I completely agree, it has absolutely no bearing on the financial. So you could look at deals for compounds that, for example, did not have any IP in China. They're not smaller. Nobody says, oh, wait a second, this doesn't have China, so I'm going to take out 10%. They look the same.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So financially, it's a non-existent issue. Where they could worry is about coordinating development. So it also depends on which stage you're in and how you've built your non-financial articles in the licensing agreement.
Right.
That is something to put an effort and thought into, not so much how much money is coming out, because that's really for Lilly, they don't care about your $12 million milestone or something. And they really don't care about that 8 to 10% of the world. They really care about US, Europe, etc. So, but if someone is going to go around and develop their drug and do all sorts of weird stuff with it and they'll have no pharmacovigilance infrastructure around that, they really care about that. So I think if people invested more time in getting these deals done, but doing them right around the non-financial aspects, they would do a much better service to themselves.
Okay, thank you.
你好吗？
Chinese.
Sure, sure. I'll continue in English if that's okay with you. You've talked a lot about therapeutics and the whole fashion, which is very interesting. I'm in diagnostics. I wanted to ask you, is there an interest in China to invest into transformative, novel diagnostic technology and companies for biomarker from China? And in particular, I observed that China leads in publication on microRNA biomarkers, but the translation to clinical IVDs is about zero because there are no tools. So I just ask if there is an interest to invest into the real tools that will transform that market segment. Do you think there is? In other words, should I, as a company, make an effort to connect and talk with people in China?
David?
Maybe I should comment first. Because Fosun Pharma has itself a branch of diagnostic. So diagnostic is become bigger and bigger in China. I would say all the major companion diagnostic companies, for example, Foundation One, you guys probably heard next generation. Foundation One, which is a division of Roche.
Oh, right.
They actually operate in China. And most of this are already operating in China. But of course, like you said, because recently my project need basically a biomarker being detected in China. A lot of them are not set up yet. So I would say you asked perfect question. Right now, it's at a time, it's not like other pharmaceutics already semi-mature, right? The market is emerging. So it's a perfect opportunity to go there for the diagnostic part of it. There are some domestic diagnostic companies, but mainly based on old technologies. The new technology are still not sophisticated. I also want to echo this Davis just said, in terms of China right part of your question, I completely agree with him. Right now, when you talk with a US company or a European company, when they were talking about China right, yes, most of them are not care about the financial part of it. But what they care about is if the China right, the people who holding the China right, gonna mess up the clinical trials and the data become conflict to each other.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, this actually also create an opportunity just because a lot of those big pharma doesn't really care about the China market. So you may be able to get the Chinese right relatively inexpensive. However, in terms of market, pharmaceutical market in general, China is emerging become I think gonna surpass Japan, gonna be the third largest pharmaceutical company market.
Yeah.
So that's why there's shortcoming on that, but opportunities also there. So if you can license something just for the China right, and make it to selling in China. That's a big thing. And also, China recently, because of the reform, has simplified the Western style getting into China. The time becomes shorter and shorter. Okay.
Just want to add about diagnostics. So it's an interesting question. So I'm assuming you're talking about diagnostics primarily to select patients for therapies and things of that nature. Is that?
We do drug development. We also provide materials to academic groups. We also are developing an IVD, which is for liver injury through drug overdose. So we can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's not specifically for companion diagnostics for pharma, but it has a place there, both pre and post treatments, if you like.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree in general what Jinping said, that it is an emerging area. It's clear that this is going to become a bigger and bigger thing there. It also has the challenges of being an emerging thing, which means that, for example, regulatory setting is not always clear. You have all sorts of hurdles. For example, you cannot take samples outside of China. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
But if you want to have a centralized lab outside of China, well, you can't.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of things that you just kind of have to figure out. I think these things, if I kind of take the example from what happened in Therapeutics, the government will eventually solve them. But for now, there's still challenges. However, you sort of have an early entrant type of advantage, as it's still not a very competitive field, and you get a lot of opportunities there as well. But it's sort of a little bit riskier from that sense.
We have 2 companies, diagnostic companies in our portfolio, and it's always baffled me actually. In the US, when you have a consumer diagnostics, the profit margin is really thin. But in China, you get very healthy profit margin for diagnostics, primarily because of the paying system is in China actually favors the hospital charge pretty high premium for the diagnostics. So it is a pretty profitable business in China for diagnostics in particular.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But I just want to add that the number of diagnostic companies probably quite small compared to the therapeutics.
Yeah,
yes.
Because my team look at the past year, I'm thinking more than 1,000 projects. Maybe not a single one in the diagnostic area.
Yeah. It's a very fragmented market. It's very channel driven and geographic. Depend on your connections to the hospital pretty much. If you have professional connections that you get to the hospital, then you own this market.
So what's the secret for this?
Local connections. Yeah. So it's good. You hold up the profit margin for the geography you are in. And the bad thing is it's hard to get a very broad application across the country.
Yeah. So doing a pre-clinical symptom lung cancer screen for Chinese men who smoke may not actually be very good, even if the addressable market is 300 million people.
Well, I think it really depends. I mean, I think what we're seeing more and more, and that's something that is unique also in China, is that sometimes you see initiatives that are driven by definitely central and some of this province government. So you do need someone who understands that to analyze that, because there are certain areas where the government will say, I want to fix this. And just because of the way the country is built there, they have a lot of power to put behind that if they really want to fix something, both in terms of regulations, funding, and what have you. So if you're lucky enough to be on the highway that they wanted to be opened up, then they could kind of push you really fast. If you're not, it gets harder. So it's a very much a case-by-case type of thing. But I would do a lot of work to figure out which ones. And they have a very clear, they have these 5-year plans, and those 5 years they have a very clear definition of what's in and what's not in. And if you're in, there's a lot of support you can get.
But you could rely on what is published. here.
Yes, yes, you can. And then even the local authorities would want to see this happening because then they can show that they're supporting that initiative, there will be funding available for that. A lot of stuff becomes, a lot of butter on the...
Yes.
Is Alzheimer's in the 5-year strategic plan, or?
Sorry?
Is Alzheimer's in the 5-year strategic plan, or?
I don't think it was one, but it's also...
Not specify any disease area, but they do have like a budgetary guideline for the next 5 years, how much additional spending they're gonna have on the healthcare.
Okay.
They will also have, like, it's typically not like Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
They might say,
Aging
we might say, we
Cancer.
want a better diagnostic for lung cancer, okay? It would be something, you know, this, we want to solve diagnosis rates in a certain condition. They're not going to say, because honestly, what does it mean to have Alzheimer's for 5 years? It has no meaning, right? You're not going to solve Alzheimer's for 5 years. You could say, I want to improve diagnosis rate, I want to improve the early stage, I want to improve it in, you know, in the rural countries, you know. It's a bit more specific, but but that makes it more effective because Alzheimer's, like a million companies could throw stuff in there, but you know, diagnosis for lung cancer men is a bit more specific.
Sure.
I think we're running out of time. Thanks everyone. Thanks for the panel. Thanks for your attention.